Everyone is still awake. It's a bit dark here, but yes, we have a bright future, hopefully. Okay, so I'm Yuki. I'm a lead researcher at Belushi Capital, and we'll have the panels introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Stokes, a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, and yeah, I think this topic is like kind of the whole point of Ethereum, so it's very important to discuss.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike, also work at the Ethereum Foundation as a researcher, and I love inclusiveness.
Hi, I'm Max, I don't work at Ethereum. I don't love inclusiveness. I'm head of research at Special Mechanisms, which is
Woo! Alright. Alright, so I think just from the introductions, you can probably already tell that there are some people that like, 5059, some people don't like it, some people like inclusionists, some people don't like it, even some people like solo stakers, some people fucking hate it. There's obviously a clear dichotomy here, so I'm hoping that, the conversation is going to be great. Alright, so let's get started with the first topic. Solo stakers. I want to pick on Max first because Max is kind of like the one that also initiated this like 3-paragraph ETH research post just talking about like how we should basically annihilate the solo stakers. So please discuss a little bit more about the missed penalties.
Yeah, I think solo stakers are a nice thing to have in the community because they're very nice people. But they need to work a little bit more on missing slots. So, I introduced this 3-paragraph research post. By the way, you're welcome for getting back some time on Avery release the Mike post.
We wrote a post together.
Yeah, and I wrote 3 paragraphs. Yeah, but the basic idea is you penalize people for missing slots because missing slots is bad for the network. And right now it costs about an order of magnitude less to miss a slot on the network than it does for the network in terms of social costs. So people are paying about $1,000 in fees, and it costs $50 to miss a slot. And that's obviously not a lot.
So, well, on this topic, and just also for context, I'm personally also looking at a lot of like missed slots data, and there is roughly around like in average 0.5% to 1% of like missed slots across the board by the proposal, which is basically like 1 in 100 to 200 blocks you have missed slots, which is not trivial if you consider the grand scheme of things. And obviously, Max is here to say that yes, we should slap them with the missed slots penalties. However, we also have ETH researchers here, which are here to protect the solo stakers. So I want to hear some opinions from Alex and Mike about how we can protect them.
Right, okay, so maybe just like for some context, taking a step back, like the problem here, like the concern is that, if we got a solo staker, maybe they don't have like a juicy Solana node, and so they have, less hardware. This is sort of by design. This is why we care about solo staker, is that we want it to be relatively easy to validate Ethereum. This improves decentralization, and kind of like I said a second ago, this is the whole point, right? And there's just like one data center node that Ethereum doesn't make sense, right? So the solo stakers are like very important, at least to have like a very centralized composition of stake. And this can be like bigger entities, but also smaller entities are like very important here. And the concern is just that, if you're like your home validator, say you put down your 2 ETH, okay, great, maybe you sell like Raspberry Pi or something, and then the issue is, for whatever reason, you just don't have the compute resources to deliver your block on time when you're meant to propose. So, yeah, I mean, what Max is saying is, now with numbers, but I'll assume you're correct around this like order of magnitude difference around these like, the incentives here. So, it would be better if the network broadly and just have less. And the one way we can do this is we can say, hey, let's actually put a penalty in place if you miss your slot. Putting aside different incentive issues, for example, people could dox you, other validators could like, you can private it, and subset of the validators like test against you, and there's games that can be played here. But yeah, that being said, like, the proposal I think is interesting for other reasons around like relays and these net builders and stuff. Like there's like time games people play, and the more if you were like to have a like stronger sort of boundary on when you propose a slot, because if you don't, then you miss it. And there's a penalty. Just to like kind of cap the time games you can play, which is also better than ever. So there's like it's kind of pretty nuanced pretty quickly, as you can tell. There's reasons to do it. But that being said, I think if you just deploy it as is, from 3 paragraphs, then yeah, you're probably going to, disproportionately affect solo stakers, which you really don't want to do.
If you're a solo staker, you need to send you like a hard drive, a router, Ethernet cable on compound.
Okay, one thing I want to add here too is, I guess in terms of like the social cost of this slot, which is what we're talking about, is this like order of magnitude difference between what the network bears as this cost and what the validator pays from just like not proposing a block. I think there is a slight difference here in that like if they miss the slot and there's no miss slot penalty, then that social cost is kind of borne by everyone. Versus if there's a miss slot penalty, it's like disproportionately pointed straight at the person who missed the slot. So like, sure, it's like accountable, like they're being held to account for not fulfilling their duty of the protocol, but it's still like singles them out in a way that may like disproportionately affect people who can't optimize everything about their staking setup. Like, for example, I'm solo staking right now, but my node's in New York. If my power went out and then I'm not able to go home and like flip my, Nook back on, then suddenly I'm liable for a miss slot penalty of like 0.5 ETH that like hits my 32 ETH principal way harder than it hits Coinbase, who just had like a small outage and lost the time.
I think Max would say that, well, let's not penalize 0.5 ETH. What about just a 0.05 ETH?
I mean, I'll just say, like, how much ETH are you staking? How like, as an economist, like, you can kind of like model this and you would say, all right, how risk averse can you really be when you have, how much is it these days? $70,000 of ETH staked on your local machine. $1,000 not gonna end anything. ETF is paying
Well, so does that $1,000 really?
Well, but it might not be $1,000 that's the problem, right? Like if you take 15 million gas times the base fee, and it's like a very high base fee environment, then it could be way more than $1,000. Right? Do we have enough? Like, do you have any estimates on the numbers on how much the fee would be?
I think it would be about how many right now. I can cap it. Like I don't see a reason to not cap it at something like 50 way or something like that. So you don't just hit the spike, because that's not what's going to change the calculus of like missing a slot, right? The only thing that's going to change the calculus is like on average and capping it at
EIP. I think I generally also very much see, and just like looking from the data, to me it seems also quite clear that if we do implement some harsh miss-off penalties, likely a lot of solo validators is just gonna, start transitioning to an idle or something of that sort. So, but I do want to pose a question of like, okay, what does Ethereum look like? Or is Ethereum still Ethereum if we don't have solo stakers? No.
Like just play out, right? Like if you don't have solo stakers, then like all of the design decisions don't make that much sense. Like you might as well just go full super node, data center node, Solana style, monolithic chain. Like I don't think if you give up solo stakers, then you don't really have any like credible censorship resistance vector. So like it doesn't really seem like there's much point of doing anything Ethereum-wise.
Yeah, I think it would be a really bad thing because we would not have 12-second block times with that shorter block times. Burning my gas and not going gas. I mean, I'm sympathetic to this, but I think we can achieve censorship resistance in other ways. And I think it's also such a small percentage of the network that for a lot of applications, the censorship resistance provided by 70% of the network solo staking is not relevant. And so we made a bunch of decisions, and we can say, oh, it's not cost. We made all these decisions to do solo staking and keep that long tail of solo stakers. But at the end of the day, we have to ask, does it matter today to keep the solo stakers, or can we somehow incentivize node operators in different parts of the world? Maybe you could have Russian node operators, you could have North Korean node operators, right? If we really want like a global network that isn't open to any one nation, the problem is not having more solo stakers operating their node from the second district of New York. It's actually to have more node operators operating all across the world in areas that have more jurisdictional freedom.
Right, but if it's hard to run a node because you like triple the block size, then like these same players no matter where they are going to have just as much difficulty, right? Like, solo stakers are everywhere.
But that's why we have to give. Are they really everywhere? Like, I mean, that's a
Well, we drive this, right? Like this is the whole point. Like everyone in this room should be like pushing people to the extent they can to like have people running more nodes in more places.
Yeah, but I think one of the ways to do that would be to give economic incentives for people to provide censorship resistance to the chain instead of expecting them to like run the node and do it on this.
So just for context here, I think the reason why Max mentioned about Russian node operator and he's so fond of Russians is because like there's obviously this thing called OFAC, which I'm sure you guys already heard like maybe 1,000 times here. Like OFAC, I guess our assumption here is like, well, look, Russian guys kind of live in a different world from us, and the American hands don't usually reach that far into Russian Putin's lands. So Russian guys is kind of like the last line of defense against like the censorship resistance against OFAC. That is like the idea here, but I don't know. What do you guys think about this kind of thoughts on this Russian node operator?
But like, just think of a thought experiment. Like, what if we were in a situation where most of the nodes were operated in Russia and China instead of most of the nodes being operated in
And North Korea.
Okay, yeah. Instead of most of the nodes being operated in US and Europe, right? If you wanted to say get something that Putin didn't like on chain, you would not be turning to individual Russian citizens to run individual nodes and put that on chain. You'd be like, hey, what if we get some nodes in the US that don't care about these laws that Putin's put in place to put this stuff on chain? And I think like, I know we don't like these states that are like bad actors, but like at the end of the day, if we don't want to be beholden to any particular consortium of states and we want to be really a truly global network, like we have to consider doing that.
Yeah, I guess my concern here is, let's say we kind of lean into the larger node requirements, but we also lean into this geographic decentralization that you're kind of talking about. To me, it seems like this is more likely to end up in a situation where, like, the subset of nodes that are like in US kind of friendly places just partition from the set of nodes that are in other. Like, solo stakers feel like more likely to be kind of going along, like not working with the state actors in order to determine what chain they belong to. Like, it just doesn't seem like a data center node in Russia is going to be following the US Ethereum chain. You know what I mean? It feels like that's moving forward, potentially.
I mean, yeah, it seems like this is exactly how we get this, like, jurisdiction arbitrage. We see this already, we see, like, relays, where it's like there are relays, like, net relays outside the states they're operating, and they don't necessarily comply with, like, say, OFAC sections, and it's this exactly how it is.
But is that a bad thing? Would you rather they just keep operating in the US and not
No, I'm saying we should have them everywhere, right? Like, you want like the special people all over the world who like enact it, and like, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's like jurisdictional arbitrage.
Do you think there's an incentive for EF to actually like try to promote node operation in an area that's underrepresented? Like, for example, do you think it's fair to have grants that try to say, hey, if you run nodes in, I don't know, North Korea, or maybe Russia. Let's just keep it Russia, right? Do you think that's something that would make sense for the health of the network as well?
So it does make sense of the network. Like, I don't think it should just be an EF thing. Again, everyone should be working towards this. This is why we're here. And that being said, like, I think it's also like tricky to directly be like yeah, what? Like, if we get the hard drives from Max and we airdrop them to like someone in Russia, let's say, like, I don't know, like, what you can do is you can like educate and you can like have events like this in places all over the world and like just like tell people what's going on. If they like it, they can join. I think it's a bit hard to like airdrop nodes and like try to do this.
Gotcha.
People have talked about putting
Flashballs. All right. So I guess I'm gonna switch the topic a little bit here and kind of go to the CR list, the inclusion list side of things. So for context, right now I believe there are 2 non-censoring relays. Right, Austin? 3. All right. Well, then, I don't know. Sure. Let's just call it 5. Maybe like 3.5. So let's say there are 3 non-censoring relays. Oh my God, I don't know. Am I gonna get bashed by Manifold, guys? Probably. All right, 5 non-censoring relays. And there's 1 non-censoring builders. Right? I believe Titan is non-censoring. And some other small builders that are also non-censoring too, but I'm just talking about the main big builders, right? Obviously, it's not a very optimistic view that we are in here today, and obviously one of the big questions that everyone has is that how does enshrine mechanism like CRS could help resolve this kind of censorship issues that we are facing on Ethereum today. So, over your mic. Great.
So yeah, I guess the TLDR of inclusion lists is super simple. It just kind of gives the validator some way of constraining the set of transactions that will end up on chain, or kind of constraining the action space of what the builder can exclude. So as a validator, I can kind of specify a list of transactions that I think should be included on chain, and then the state transition function of the whole network depends on those transactions becoming part of the chain. So it's a pretty simple design. The concept's been around since I think the Khaled wrote about it in 2020, and Francesco's written a ton about it kind of over the years. There was a few recent developments that made it kind of surface in terms of something that we're thinking a lot about again. Great. I guess the advent of censoring builders was a huge change. Immediately post the merge, there was a lot of censoring relays, and then all these non-censoring relays spun up in response, and that was great. But the issue with the current MetaBoost system is that the builders ultimately decide. So even if I'm connected to a non-censoring relay, I can get a block from the censoring builder, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the non-censoring relay in the first place. So I like inclusion lists because it kind of lowers the cost of altruism, which is kind of the difference between, participating in the MetaBoost auction and still getting the exposure to the MD rewards that everyone else is getting exposed to. But you can still behave altruistically by putting these transactions in the inclusion list and making sure that they end up on chain.
Is it fair to say that the current proposals, I mean, there are multiple different proposals out there, but the current proposals around inclusion list kind of assumes that there's always a non-trivial amount or significant amount of perhaps so altruistic, not bound by OPEC kind of actors in the system that are constantly helping to include it, right?
Yeah, I think one nice way of thinking about this is how many people are going to run the consensus clients stock version, right? And I actually instead of framing it as identifying censored transactions and getting them on chain, I like framing it more as identifying a list of transactions that are eligible for inclusion, marking them for inclusion, and then the protocol kind of forces through their inclusion. So it does depend on people not modifying their client software. But I think if we frame it in the right way, and these, I think actually the different design iterations do have different implications from this framing perspective. And if you get that right, then enough people would run the stock client software that it would make a meaningful improvement in the censorship resistance of the chain. Because going in there and tinkering with the Prism client or Lighthouse is a pretty big operation, and you have to maintain your own fork of the client and all the network upgrades in the future. There is a lot of power in just the stickiness of defaults, and having a default that prioritizes censorship resistance feels important.
Didn't we already have that? We already have the default client that you were supposed to look at it.
So yeah, I guess MetaBoost is a weird example because it was kind of this version of the out of protocol software that everyone, like, the shelling fence was broken on it very quickly, I guess. So like it became part of the default things that these node operators run. But looking back, like I don't think that was necessarily like a good thing, you know.
But like, I wonder if you think that if this had not happened, that we would still see Coinbase doing this.
As in like if there was no Medboost, Coinbase would be out of the cloud business.
Would they be out of the cloud business, or would they be doing filtering?
I mean, they would be out of USA.
Or they would filter.
In Russia.
Maybe, yeah. But it might also be that if they were building their own blocks, they would filter. If we didn't have that risk.
Yeah. There will be basically Coinbase will be censoring without if we don't have Medboost, essentially.
Also, none of this is legal advice.
Yes, none of this is legal. Yes. Okay, got it. I guess one thing I'm also a little bit curious about is like some of the regulatory side of things, if you don't mind. Okay, maybe not today. Let's not talk about regulatory stuff. It's private. Let's forget about regulatory stuff. All right, so concurrent proposals. So recently, some folks on the panels have published some concurrent proposals, ETH research proposals. That was not a free private one, that was like quite long. And you know, that was a good read. And so it claims to also brings better economic censorship properties for censorship resistance against economic incentives. And Max also claimed to have some thoughts on like, well, maybe it can also bring some censorship resistance against regulatory censorship. So maybe Max, if you want to elaborate that bit.
Yeah, I think the basic idea here is that there are two reasons we care about censorship. And actually, Powell, I think, a 2015 blog post. So by the way, I cited the earliest blog post so far, so good luck. But he said, at the time, Silk Road was a big thing. He said, censorship resistance is not only important so that Silk Road can operate through Ethereum, but it's also important so that more fundamental things like DeFi can operate. And he gave this example of, what if you have a call option that has to be executed on chain? And you have a seller of a call option, a buyer of a call option, and say it's worth $10 to execute. So it's worth $10 for the buyer of the call option to execute it. It's also worth minus $10 if it gets on chain for the seller. And so now the seller is a motivated adversary who wants to keep the transaction on the chain. If the chain has weak censorship resistance, then he will be able to censor that. And then, you know, backwards effect and all the way there, there's no reason to even enter into the options on there in the first place. If at the end of the day, any surplus that's created for you is going to get leaked away to the proposer in this censorship game, there's no reason to play it. And that's what he was talking about. And I think what we talk about with multiple concurrent proposers is something that addresses not only the regulatory aspect, but also what we call short-term censorship resistance or economic censorship resistance that lets you do these kind of financial activities. I'll let you do your part of this.
Yeah, so I guess this idea of multiplicity and concurrent block proposers has been like floating around for a while, and I think you guys wrote a paper about it like in October of 2023 or something. So the point of this post was to kind of frame it in terms of Ethereum, like how this could look from an Ethereum consensus layer perspective. And I guess one aspect of this that is helpful when I was thinking about it is that currently today, like in the call option case, if someone wanted to censor that transaction, they'd only have to bribe a single proposer, right? So whoever is the proposer for a single slot just gets bribed. Kind of taking that and just extrapolating it to if there was 10 people proposing blocks during that slot, you'd have to bribe all 10 of them to leave that transaction on, because that transaction does like pay a tip to them, so like they'd be incentivized to put it on chain. So that's kind of the initial argument that kind of made sense to me. In terms of what it means for Ethereum, it could be like potentially quite similar to what we have today. You just have a few proposers that are elected as you know, eligible to produce a block every slot. They all propose concurrently. you need to do some figuring out to handle like the ordering of the transactions on the 5 blocks that show up. You have to like deduplicate them, remove any ones that have like not for use, et cetera, et cetera. In general, it seems like, at least on our first exploratory analysis, it seems like those were mostly engineering things and could be solved. But it's like a brand new proposal, so definitely could be missing something from the like deep consensus stuff.
Alex, do you have any jabs at that?
Well, I mean, one thing with this is I think there's still like edge cases, or maybe even not really edge cases, with like this like block merging bit that like historically has been confusing for me around like how this makes sense. Because you could have an earlier transaction in like one proposer's block that somehow then validates someone else's transaction. And so you need to like have like a lot of awareness around like every proposer's block to like merge them in a way that makes everyone happy. And I don't see how you do that if these proposers are distinct entities.
So I think like the point of this is there are mechanisms which are order agnostic, which means that like for example, say in Uniswap, if I swap one way and Mike tries to swap the same way, it might trigger the slippage count on Mike's trade. His trade might fail, which is what you're talking about, right? Where
For example, I mean, I think there's like so many
responses and other stuff. But that situation is because of a certain type of mechanism that we've developed that works pretty well on a single proposer architecture. Once you open it up to multiple proposer architecture, you can do things like bulk options, bulk batch options. You can do all these kinds of things which are order agnostic, which don't depend on which order is executed in. And I think that's where the difference is between people who thought about this previously in terms of data sharding and stuff, are trying to weave things together in order to execute them all in order, whereas I'm saying, hey, most transactions will care about the order, and the ones that do care about the order can go in the kind of leader of the leaders block. So we'll kind of designate one of the leaders as leader 1A, and then they'll be leader 1B.
But I thought the whole point is to end the proposer monopoly, and it sounds like they're still a monopolist.
Well, they're not any more monopolists on inclusion. They're still going to get to order transactions, and what we're saying, and we've said in this paper, is basically when you give app designers a little bit more tooling, a little bit more censorship resistance, they can use that power over the proposer to build mechanisms that don't require ordering. And so what's left over is a monopoly on ordering, but hopefully that doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Sure, at the end of the transition period, do we care about average compatibility, like with the apps we have today, or in this current paradigm, like, it seems like they can start working effectively.
Did the ETH researcher just ask about
I'll add one thing here, which is there's actually a cool kind of bridge between inclusion lists and multiple concurrent proposers. Davide, also from the ETH, just put out an ETH research post on this. And the idea is, and it actually kind of circles back to this whole transaction reversion, potentially problematic thing, which is that instead of multiple concurrent block proposers, you can have multiple concurrent inclusion lists builders. So that everyone just commits to like a set of addresses and nonces rather than like the specific contents of the transaction. And this kind of like might simplify and kind of like you said, this takes away the monopoly on inclusion because now you have a bunch of people contributing to the inclusion of transactions, but the ordering could still take place very much like we have today, where it's just like one single proposer doing all the ordering. So that could be interesting.
Gotcha. Well, one question is I do have on this concurrent block proposal is that because I think on the ETH research post the assumption there was that we had two concurrent block proposals, but is it more like you could potentially be like just n numbers of block proposals as well? And how does that kind of scale in terms of like?
Yeah, I think this is where we would probably need to talk to the client devs a lot more about what it actually means to build this software. But like, for example, one thing that scales linearly is just the amount of data that passes around the network, right? Right now we have one block floating around the network per slot. If you have 10 proposers, you have 10 blocks.
Right.
Potentially even worse scaling is the fact that the number of forks, like the number of heads of the chain for a given slot, increases by 2 to the power of n, right? So with one proposer, they could either propose a block or not. So there's only kind of 2 outcomes.
Yeah.
With 2 proposers, they could both propose. The first one could propose, the second one misses. the second one proposes the first one misses, or they could both miss. So now you have 4 potential heads of the chain at each slot, and like you just scale that to the end because every proposer could either show up or not.
Right.
So like these types of data and I guess networking software considerations are stuff that I don't feel equipped to answer personally.
And just to like, the other thing I said about this is basically once you allow publications, you allow the block proposer to sign multiple blocks, which is a slashable offense that can happen and has happened. Once you allow that, you have an infinite number of potential views anyway. So that's what we said basically. Hey, this expansion number of views can happen based on non-slashable behavior, but there's already a need to do that. It makes an infinite number of views. Slashable behavior.
One thing that I was thinking was like having multiple block proposals as of the validated landscape that we have today, which is what, maybe like 30% cloud, Coinbase cloud, 40% like, because you can just do the math and say, all right, I'm gonna randomly take like 2 out of this like entire Python. You know, there's a 0.4 chance that I'm gonna get Coinbase, and then a 0.4%. So like it's like it mitigates the monopoly, but it doesn't. You know, depends on the number of heads that you pick. It doesn't really solve or eliminate the monopoly either.
But it does scale exponentially, which is nice, right? So like, let's say 95% of the network is censored, right? Then the probability that both proposers are censoring is 95 squared. The probability that all 3 is 95 cubed. So it just scales to the power of n. So that's just like an exponential decay, which is good. I mean, that implies that you potentially need like many concurrent proposers.
Right. Basically, which may add a lot of overheads to the network as well, which as you mentioned.
Yeah. But I don't know. How many would you advocate for?
I think 10 is a good ballpark.
We like powers of 2 though, so we do like 8.
Alright, so I guess we gotta have 8 concurrent proposals. I guess before everyone falls asleep, I'm also gonna ask Max the question of like, why do you hate inclusionists?
Yeah, I think I'm not so aggressively against it in person on Twitter. The difference I think between inclusionists and multiple proposers is that inclusionists automatically have a 1 block delay. So if you're a proposer in the current slot, you can only force it in the next slot. And for financial applications like the talk talked about, that is good enough because the world keeps on turning while you're waiting for your altruistic solo staker money to get you on chain.
I will say, if we go to some version of like ETH that looks like execution tickets, then it would be safe slot inclusion because the beacon proposer constructs an inclusion list that the execution proposer has to enforce. So but that's kind of
times probably get bigger.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, but if you're talking about like bound to a single slot in terms of yeah.
Convinced?
Well, on that execution ticket point, they will absolutely run PDS. So you will have execution ticket PDS, which is run by a person on the execution ticket, and PDS run by a person with and the execution ticket PDS will be not something they actually person on the ticket, which will be either or second. So.
Or Titan.
Did you want to scale it? Could we say, well, we don't know how to price these things, so we don't know about that.
Oh yeah, the pricing of, well, that's a whole different discussion. Okay, great. I think we still have a bit more time, yes. I think one other question that I wanted to kind of like dive into today is around the sort of like what do you see as Ethereum if we didn't have a censorship resistance? I know Mike has had a great talk about this at was it a Bankless or a Gwenny podcast? I don't know. But like, I just want to hear like from you guys like what's Ethereum if there was no censorship resistance?
FinTech.
Yeah, like bad fintech.
Solana?
Because like, play it out, right? So then like, there's no censorship resistance. Like, this is in a world where I mean, yeah, okay. There's like, I guess, two sides to it. Like, one of them is just like in terms of permissionlessness. If we can't have like permissionless innovation at the execution layer, right, then like a lot of these, I think people find this technology is no longer available to them. And then the other side of the coin is like, why is this the case? Well, it's probably the case because, you know, we're all in like one or a few like, you know, quote, DOS jurisdictions where like we can't, you know, have a central instance. And in that case, you know, it's just a few more steps until like these same jurisdictions apply pressure to like shut the whole thing down. And it's gone.
Right.
I think it means no more Shiba, no more any fun coins that get launched, no more new DeFi primitives launched by people who invest, and probably worse than that in the long run.
I think today we have kind of like general agreement on the fact that solo stakers, those altruistic actors, are very important piece of the Ethereum today. In fact, I think they kind of make the Ethereum that we have today. However, if you look at the statistic, it is also true that the percentage of solo stakers or people who behave like solo stakers, aka they miss a lot of slots, is like few percent, right? Like maybe, I don't know, like 1, 2, 3% type of count of validators among, you know, 1.1 million validators.
I thought it was more like 5.
Sure, 5.
That's the number.
But
Every percent is important.
right, every solo staker is important, exactly. But how do you see, like, in the future this number may shift towards one side or the other? Like, do you think that we are just seeing this kind of like statistic because of market condition is so bullish that everyone's just consolidating? But then once we start World War III, that you know, that maybe everyone's just gonna shift towards solo stakers. So I'm just curious, like, what you guys foresee this?
I think in general, the limiting factor is the capital requirements, right? Like 32 ETH is just, like Max was saying earlier, it's like 70,000, more than that, right?
Not impressive.
So yeah, I'm still bullish in like kind of simple proof of stake upgrades that could get us towards lowering that 32 requirement. Max EV, I've been talking about for a really long time, but if we reduce the total number of validators by allowing some of them to go bigger and some of them to potentially consolidate, then you could imagine like lowering that floor potentially. Yeah, I think in general, the current set of solo stakers seems like quite price insensitive, right? Like they're pretty sticky right now. I think there's also really interesting questions to be asked about the issuance curve. And Ansgar, he literally just left, but he was saying over there, definitely bottom in if you wanna talk about that. But in terms of like the relationship between the issuance curve and the amount of like the total supply of ETH at stake feels very important because as a solo staker, you run the risk of potentially getting priced out in different versions of stake capping or issuance curve. So yeah, I think right now we have like a robust solo staking community, and we need to just like make sure to not lose that. And I think grow it as much as we can, but growing it does seem quite difficult right now for capital requirement reasons. Yeah. I mean, DBT might help with this. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but it seems like potentially interesting.
Yeah, like in general, we should be pushing for protocol changes or improvements that like lower this cost of altruism, right? So that's how we do expand this little staker set over time. It's just making it easier to like run nodes, lower capital requirements, all those kinds of things.
Why don't you run a node?
Well, you just don't know.
I don't have enough Raspberry Pi. No, I just don't want more than, I don't want 32 ETH exposure.
Oof. Or maybe Max doesn't have to run the Alright, let's not dive into that. Alright, so I think we have. Okay, so I think there was someone raising a hand there. Yes, please.
I just wanted to say, isn't it more relevant? Isn't it not so relevant that there are 5% solo stickers, but more the fact that it is possible for individuals anywhere in the world to become validators if needed? it, like if governments attack all the major, centralized stakers, the network is going to die, and it's not possible for individuals all around the world to themselves basically save the network. I kind of thought that was the idea.
I think it's a really interesting framing. It's kind of like, instead of viewing solo staking as like a profitable enterprise, it's just like something that's feasible given consumer grade hardware. I guess I'm not so convinced that like in the case of a like state level attack on the network, there would be time to respond and like spin up new validators and deploy through the beacon contract and stuff like that. Like it seems like if the attack was happening and like the world was falling apart, you kind of need that backbone to already be in place. Obviously, like spinning up new ones in the future should be possible, but I'm not sure a world where like Lido stakes 50% and Coinbase stakes 50%, and we're just like, okay, but you can't run a solo staking node, and we'll just spin it up if those two entities go down is like a good outcome.
And also, I think the reason why I'm thinking of percentage of it is because I believe that the more solo stakers that we have on Ethereum is strictly improvements for the censorship resistance property of Ethereum broadly, especially against like regulatory side of things. Obviously, economic censorship is a different thing, but on that front, I think it's an improvement basically to have more. Yes, please.
So you were talking about inclusion listing perhaps like being included in client configurations because people usually just won't like run something custom. There's another thing that was included that I don't remember what it's called. It's passing execution layer client data to the consensus layer. So we have like sort of an opt out on execution layer data. If we start including too many things in like that opt out and people have to manually configure that and deal with the upstream changes and stuff, doesn't that create sort of like a market for institutions to create their own closed source clients and then maybe market that to other institutions and then maybe like have a large portion of the network run with closed source clients?
Yeah, I think this kind of comes back to this, like, what are the social norms that we're going to try and enforce, right? We did give up a huge social norm by allowing that boost to be run by 90% of Ethereum validators. Like that completely changed the Overton window of like what is normal validator behavior. Probably like certainly for the worse. And so I think, yeah, anything that increases the probability of people running custom software is bad. Also, like it is bad for solo stakers too. Like beyond capital requirements, just downloading the software, like getting it all running on your machine, like with your current build and everything. Like I'm a CS person. Like it took me a while to figure out, So like it's not possible for like someone who doesn't have a technical background. I don't think. Well, it's real.
Actually, I want to push back a little bit here because it seems to me that having like more heterogeneous environments, like, let's say there is someone who's building enterprise closed source clients that they just use it for their own purposes. Isn't that like just making the network more anti-fragile?
Client diversity, where
Yes.
where the client fork is a censored fork.
It also becomes a problem because clients are not they're not a revenue generating thing. And so if then we have them competing with revenue generating versions, they're probably not going to survive.
So basically, she's saying like the client might not be revenue generating. If there is a client that is revenue generating, then maybe that's a new stable revenue.
Clients are not revenue generating, but they're also generating. Ask like my answer for that.
But close to still being all probably.
Yeah.
But I think that is interesting though. Like if there's a client that is revenue, as you mentioned, revenue generating in some way, and that because if that's the case, then that may seem like a new, silver equilibrium where everyone's like, oh yeah, you get 50%, right? In that case, maybe it's the job of like EF to also figure out like, okay, well, how can we even democratize that and just say open source everything?
Yeah, and it becomes more difficult. I mean, it becomes easier. Basically, the government to just say you can't run prison or get because we have the ability to reminder that
Yeah, I was about to say this does feel like a situation like if 95% of the chain is running this closed source version, then it's very easy for that closed source version to diverge from the open source version in terms of what they view as like the valid chain, and then you're in this like contentious work situation. I mean, I do think there probably will be clients that are closed source and they'll like Linux versus Red Hat model, like white glove treatment for some institutions that might want to run staking but don't want to run the download stuff, software, and all that stuff. Yeah, I guess my hope is that all of the institutional staking that starts to ramp up isn't all through Coinbase.
Yeah. So, well, I think in the interest of time, and before we go grab a beer and drink, I want to also thanks all the panel speakers here for the amazing conversation we had today, and also I hope you guys also enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you.